Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our travel guide series called Exploring, where myself, Dr. Lilian Céspedes González, takes you to different parts of Europe that are explored in a slightly different way. We try to promote the idea of moving away from mass tourism and going more around the exploring of all of these countries and cities through the off the beaten path and hidden gems kind of style. And since we had already started on my home country of Spain, I thought I would bring back some other Spanish content for an area of the country that is often quite largely forgotten by a lot of European and, well, I guess international tourists, which is the lesser known south. Like, I guess when a lot of people think of Spain, they always think of Andalusia or Barcelona, or at worst, Valencia. And Spain is a very large country with, many different regions, and many of them are not far away from these places that get so crowded and yet are incredibly, wonderful. So I'm just trying to provide some alternatives in case that you want to enjoy lovely Spanish weather, but still engage with culture while avoiding many, many, many people and the crowds. So today we're going to be exploring the lesser known South. So we're going to be going through three main specific regions of Spain. And well, I'll introduce them in a moment. But before I do that, please let me remind you that everything that we do here through the Travolution Tours agenda of our virtual tours, talks, and travel guides is all done through the generosity of our sponsors, supporters, and members of our Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal community. So the links are right there. You are always welcome to give us a hand. It's much obliged, much appreciated. And check the links in the chat and in the description. That being said, we're going to carry on now with the actual introduction of the subject itself. So, what are we going to be looking at? We're going to be looking at the area of Murcia, Castilla-La Mancha, and Extremadura. Murcia, just so you know, is the region that is wedged between Andalusia and Valencia. It's a small uniprovincial province, as we call them, or well, uniprovincial community actually. So it often goes off the radar, but it's very important for many reasons, which we're going to find out in a few moments. Then we have Castilla-La Mancha, which is a very important part of Spain, in many ways, the very much backbone of the country, and where we're going to explore a lot of Quixote content, since this is Quixote land essentially. And then we're going to be going to Extremadura. Extremadura is sort of wedged between Andalusia and Castilla, or at least some parts of Castilla, and the Portuguese border. So hopefully this will give you a different appreciation from the south and many different traditions. So let's get talking about the region of Murcia. So there are many, many items to explore in Murcia overall, but one of the greatest appeals that Murcia has is the area of what we call El Mar Menor, which is this section that I've put here for you on the right-hand side of the slide. This is a massive coastal lagoon that has been actually occupied since the Paleolithic, and it is the largest lagoon in Spain. It is actually separated from the Mediterranean, and it's very high salinity. So this is the place where a lot of people kind of go if they want to experience something similar to the Dead Sea, but without going that far away, essentially. It's just a beautiful area overall in terms of its, not just landscapes, but nature and the beauty that you can find in a lot of these islands, which I think a lot of people underappreciate in many ways. Well, in the area of Murcia as well, and the image that you have here on the left, we have a lot of ancient and prehistorical content, and very crucial actually to understand not just Spain but Mediterranean culture. So what you're seeing here on the left is what we call La Bastida de Tonada, and this is a settlement or a discovery from the Bronze Age, from about the year 2000 to 1550 before Christ or before Common Era, from what we call the Algar culture. Algar culture were one of the most influential Mediterranean cultures in Europe. They are very much responsible for the spread of what is essentially the Bronze Age heights in the area of Spain and, well, up to parts of France. And this specific site, La Bastida de Totana, is incredible because it contains a city, a full funerary complex with many burials like the ones that you can see here, and a fortress. So again, you don't necessarily have to go to archaeological museums in Madrid or Barcelona to actually engage with a lot of culture that is typical to Spain and very important for the foundation of the country. Well, let me take you now to another aspect of Murcia. Murcia has a lot of religious history. Many conservative and traditional areas of Spain are, of course, loaded with Christian liturgy, and Murcia is no different. And this is Caravaca de la Cruz. Caravaca de la Cruz is one of the 5 places in the world with its own jubilee. These are Jerusalem, Rome, Santiago de Compostela, and Santo Toribio de Liébana. The last 2 we actually saw in the previous episode of Exploring Spain in the Celtic North. Well, Caravaca de la Cruz is a church from the 17th century. It also has a piece from the Lignum Cross, from the cross of Jesus. And it is home to actually a very important tradition, which is quite peculiar and represented by the picture that's just coming into the screen now. So this is a UNESCO celebration, which we call Los Caballos del Vino. And it is a whole festivity around horse culture, which celebrates every single year in May. A lot of people, I guess, associate Spanish horse riding with Andalusia, Andalusian horses and whatnot. Actually, the reality of events is that many of them are bred in Murcia. But, because Murcia is a relatively small region, everybody always, I guess, associates it with Andalusia. So it is Murcia, the place where you can find not just many impeccable horse breeds, but a lot of festivities that highlight this kind of heritage. Well, let me take you to a completely different aspect of this area. This is part of what you can experience if you go to Las Islas Hormigas, which is an area of the islands that I showed you earlier in the map of the Mar Menor, which is a protected maritime space. It contains about 19 square kilometers of protected area, and it is a lovely place for the conservation of biosphere. It's considered one of the cleanest parts of the Mediterranean, and it's become really popular in recent years precisely because of that and because of conservation for scuba diving. Normally, the scuba diving is not something that you do on your own. You need to go with a proper instructor and, a school or whatever, precisely to avoid damage to the area. But it is absolutely stunning and beautiful, and, well, something to do in the area, which perhaps is not what you thought about. But it's since 2015, so for the last 10 years now, it's been considered one of the best hotspots for this kind of maritime exploration in the whole of Europe. Well, not happy with that. Let me take you to a very traditional aspect of Spanish culture that you can explore best in Murcia, which has to do with Easter. Now, I'm sure when I say Easter, most people think, oh, the Easter parade of Sevilla. Sure, and go there and deal with the masses where every single year many people suffer from heat strokes, from anxiety attacks, and from very serious oppression from the crowds and end up in hospital. Don't do that. If you really want to appreciate Easter, you can do that in literally any Spanish town, any city, any village. We all go crazy for it. So don't be a fool and don't get yourself caught in these, kind of things. The locals hate it when the tourists kind of come and add into it because they don't necessarily know that you as a tourist are gonna appreciate, let's say, the rules and conventions about it and certain, health and safety concerns. The locals can be quite abrasive too about how they perform these festivities. Well, if you want to experience Easter in a way that is really unique, really cool, and you still want to be in the south, go to Murcia and go to the area of Moratalla. And here you're going to experience something that we call a tamborada. A tamborada comes from the word tambor, which literally means a drum, as I think the picture probably signifies very well. And this is a UNESCO protected, by the way, Easter celebration, which began in the 16th, 17th century in the area, and that originally was performed by the Franciscan drummers. And it is supposedly inspired by the earthquake that occurred following the death of Jesus. So it is a very impactful kind of Easter celebration because the drumming can be really, well, I guess, very much in your face. The entire point is that the Easter parade is just drums and after drums, plus of course some saints and virgins. But you're still gonna get the feeling of what an Easter parade should be as part of Spanish culture overall, which is of course beautiful religious imagery and what have you not, with a very specific twist, which is the music of Easter. A lot of people don't realize how fundamental Easter is for the musical celebrations in Spain, and this is a very extreme but very cool way of engaging with it, I think. And you will be in a relatively small town in Murcia where you can also engage with local culture and get away from the crowds once again. Well, now that I've given you some key, perhaps, things to do or locations, let me talk to you about specific Murcian cities, because there are lots of cities in Murcia that are worthwhile. And well, the first one, of course, is Murcia itself, Murcia capital, which has lots of religious buildings. My goodness, there are more than I can count. The cathedral is beautiful, as you can see. It's a lovely Baroque exterior with incredible Gothic inside. It honestly is 100% worth your while in that regards. And it's also the church where we have the funeral uh, resting place for Alfonso X el Sabio, Alfonso X, the Wise, which is one of the most important kings of the Spanish Middle Ages. So if you are into that aspect of our history, definitely the place for you to visit. On top of that, the bell tower, which you cannot exactly see here very well because of the angle the picture is taken on, the bell tower of the cathedral in Murcia is actually the second tallest in Spain after the Giralda in Sevilla. So again, little nuggets of history, culture, and architecture that otherwise you would be missing. Well, now let me tell you about Lorca. Lorca is a relatively well-known town in Spain as a beach tourist resort kind of thing. Um, but besides that, it has actually a very lovely castle, as you can see from the 9th century, which is the result of the back and forth between the Christian and Muslim kingdoms of the Spanish Reconquista. So you can go for the beach if you want, but there is so much more to explore. As you can see, a lot of these places that I always give you references to is not just because of the history or the culture. There are many, many more things that you can do and that can appeal to a wide audience of people. But I'm always trying to give you the edge so that you can make the most out of them. Well, on top of that, one of the interesting things about Lorca is that in the extension of the castle and part of the city, you can still find the Jewish quarter and a synagogue, which is a very important part of Spanish history, given the fact that we were one of the countries in Europe that were amongst the earliest to expel our Jewish community. And yet the Jewish heritage of Spain is very important for us all and something that we're coming to terms and have been coming to terms, particularly since the time of Franco and the transition into democracy. So if you are into this exploration of your identity, your religious culture, or your patrimony, this is another place that you should definitely visit for sure. Well, and then we have Cartagena. Cartagena, without a doubt, is one of the most popular places to visit in Murcia because, frankly, it's just a very nice town to walk around. Even without highlighting a specific place or another, it's just a pleasant and beautiful town to walk around. But the importance about Cartagena is the fact that Cartagena was one of the most important settlements in the Mediterranean during ancient times. This was the famous Carthago Nova of the Carthaginians, and it had been settled, well, way before, in the 3rd century before Christ or before Common Era, by the Punic people of Europe until eventually the Carthaginian Empire develops, properly speaking, and becomes such an important city in that context. So we have some Carthaginian remains, which is what you can see here exposed actually um, on the side picture, which is part of the Carthaginian wall of Carthago Nova and then Cartagena. And we do have as well a lot of Roman remains overall, which is, well, quite important because a lot of people associate Roman history again with some very specific places in Spain. And well, we're going to be talking a lot more about Roman remains in Spain, but not necessarily with these areas that I'm talking about. And yet you will be able to explore them without having to once again engage with thousands of masses. The city of Cartagena as well, by the way, within its beauty, it's quite well known because, well, uh, a lot of the city and some parts of the city were very badly destroyed during the Spanish Civil War. In fact, the ruin that you have in front of you now is the old cathedral, which is a peculiar story. The cathedral was actually first in Cartagena, and then it kind of got moved to Murcia city itself. They were churches of different status beforehand, but as you can see, the bombing was done in here by the national rebels that went against the established republic. And since the republic was very important in the area of Murcia and Cartagena specifically, because it was a stronghold for the naval base, this suffers quite a lot. So again, as you can see, you can experience a huge range of history, culture, etc. in small places like this, which are definitely worth the while. Well, we're gonna leave the region of Murcia behind and we're gonna move to Castilla-La Mancha. I actually lived in Castilla-La Mancha for a little while, a few years back, but I was in the area of Toledo, which is the two areas that we're not gonna visit in Castilla-La Mancha today are Toledo and Guadalajara. Why? Because Guadalajara, first of all, or at least a great chunk of Guadalajara, historically, is not always been considered part of Castilla-La Mancha. And Toledo is not going to be included because, or at least the city of Toledo itself, because it's a very popular touristic destination in Spain, since it's 40 minutes by the AVE train, the high velocity train from Madrid, and it's already frankly quite infested of people. It's a wonderful town. I very much recommend that if you want to see it, go see it, but don't just get stuck in there because it's a tiny town. In the summer the heat is awful, and you need to plan your visit very well. It's not that it's not worth the while, but I'm not here to necessarily point at places that are already well known and need further help. I want to highlight places in Castilla-La Mancha that a lot of people don't necessarily know about, and that's why we're going to be talking about Albacete. So Castilla-La Mancha is kind of this a big chunk. It's actually one of the largest regions in the whole of Spain in terms of square meters, where the landscapes are just never ending. It's pretty flat. Nothing much really happens because it's a very rural kind of area. In fact, when I was little, it was one of the most depopulated areas of Spain and with the highest number of literacy issues, income problems, etc. Because life out there is hard. The weather is indomitable, is very, very, very hot almost all year round because it's a massive frying pan essentially. It's very similar to Madrid in that regards, and there isn't much to do with as a way of life besides agriculture and very few industries. So because of that, places like these do make more use of the benefits of tourism. Albacete is a region that historically used to belong to Murcia for the longest time. But after the essentially after the dictatorship and the transition into democracy, the split of the regions and provinces in Spain had to be essentially reassessed and redone, and it ended up belonging to the area of Castilla-La Mancha due to various socioeconomic reasons, which I don't really have time to explain today, but perhaps another time. Well, one of the things that I really want to highlight is La Feria. There is a big fair in Albacete, which is an international tourist destination that, believe it or not, brings about 2 million people to the city every year. It's not very well known, but it's a very big thing. So this is in honor of La Virgen de los Llanes, I believe, in September, on the middle of September, if I remember correctly, beginning to middle of September, because it's one of these fairs that lasts for several days, and it's been going on since the 14th century. So a lot of these celebrations of virgin saints, whatever, have their origins in similar events that we used to do in the medieval times, and it's a parade for the Virgin in typical dress, which is what you see here in the background. And then we have La Batalla de Flores, which is a very popular part of the parade where essentially people throw confetti and garlands, and it's just very colorful and quite nice. There is lots of traditional music and dance, and overall it's a good it's a good party. And again, if you want to experience the full folklore of religious festivities in Spain, I've already told you a lot of people going here, but frankly, this one is worth the while. It's very special. And while you are in there, come for the fair, stay for other things. Explore the cuchilleria, which is the historical section of the city dedicated to knives, swords, blade production, etc., etc. This is what the monument on the left is. It's a traditional man working with knife production. 90% of the blades in Spain have been produced in Albacete since the 15th century. It's a very important way of life for the locals. There's lots of like artisan workshops and things like that. So you can go and take part in some of these activities, which again is a different way of enjoying a holiday and doing something a bit more hands-on that perhaps is more meaningful for you as an experience and definitely will have a huge impact in the community. And then, like in many other parts of Spain, Albacete is home to a very important rock festival. This is Viña Rock. It's one of the most important music festivals in Spain. Not a lot of people don't know it because it's kind of important for Spanish people in Spain, if you see what I mean. But it's started to attract some attention in the international sphere. It is a display of typical rock bands, many of which are Spanish rock, which perhaps is not the best well known in Europe or beyond. So if you're into music and you want to experience, a Spanish culture with an edge, Viña Rock honestly represents and delivers. So as you can see, Albacete has a big party going on. Well, now let's talk about nature. I am taking you now to an area that is actually between Albacete and Ciudad Real, which is another one of the provinces in Castilla-La Mancha, and this is el Parque Nacional de las Lagunas del Ribera. And this is a national park which essentially contains a set of little lakes or lagoons, I guess, which are considered the largest wetlands in Spain, dating from the Jurassic period, and with a lot of connections to the narrative of El Quixote. A lot of Castilla-La Mancha, like I said, has Quixote heritage left, right, and center. In fact, Cervantes himself inspired the background of the novel and a lot of the events in this particular region because, well, like I was mentioning, the very background and I guess livelihood of the area lended itself very well to the criticism that Cervantes puts into his novel. The poverty, the misery, the struggle of Spanish people already in the Golden Age was noticeable in this part of the country. And well, this is how we actually get to the next area, which is of course the sections dedicated to Ciudad Real, Cuenca, and Toledo. Well, what can I tell you about this that you probably didn't imagine already? I was already hinting and mentioning Quixote, and there is one place that screams Quixote left, right, and center, which is Campo de Criptana. Campo de Criptana is a small, well, relatively small village. It's incredibly picturesque. Even if you don't do anything other than go to see the windmills, two of which, or some of which are actually visitable, by the way, so you can go with a guided group and explore them. The village itself is just charming, and it is, I will say, one of the most beautiful places where I've ever seen a sunset. So going here for sunset or sundown is actually quite magical because the landscape is kind of so arid and desolate that it just reflects into the sky, creating some very interesting tones and very much recommended, honestly. Very much recommended. But don't do it in the heat of summer. In general, don't visit any of the regions that I'm talking about today in the heat of summer. Go from the middle of September earliest until the beginning of November. And honestly, throughout the majority of October, the weather will still be delightful. When I took this picture, it was like the 10th of October, and we were still at 27 degrees. So, you will not need a jacket, essentially. Now, Campo de Criptana is, of course, the place where the windmills of Quixote are. This is the exact location by Cervantes, the windmills that Quixote himself is supposed to be fighting against. It is 10 of them that are in total, and 3 of them are still original from the 16th century. So they would have been the actual historical windmills that Quixote would have fought against. There was actually a lot of activity in this area during different wars, so not all of them have survived. Some of them have had to be repaired over the years, etc. But this was an area that was very heavily affected by the Peninsular War and Las Guerras Carlistas, or the Carlist Wars, which are sets of wars that happened in the early and the 19th century, first against the French, and then a war that we have amongst ourselves in Spain is one of our many civil wars for the control of the country, depending on which branch of the Spanish monarchy side you were on. So it's just going to receive a lot of damage, and that's why not all of the windmills are original from the 16th century. But still, the fact that we have three of them still working, by the way, because all of these windmills are working, and some of the visits that you can do is while they're doing the milling, is honestly quite fascinating. I've been to a few things like this in different parts of Europe. Very, very few compare because it's such an iconic landscape. So another thing that is actually quite well associated with the area of Campo de Criptana is this woman, which perhaps, if you know nothing about Spanish pop culture, will mean nothing to you. But this is the very iconic Sara Montiel. Now, Sara Montiel, who is from Campo de Criptana originally, is one of the most famous, most celebrated traditional singers of Spanish music. On top of that, this woman became a very important actress during the 50s and the 60s. She was like the femme fatale of a lot of Spanish productions. She then became an international star during the dictatorship, and she was actually a very interesting person because a lot of the things she worked on were, against censorship during the time of Franco. So Sara Montiel, being from Campo de Criptana, is a big thing because, it's the countryside. It's a homage to rural Spain, a homage to an area of the country that doesn't have a lot of credit or a lot of things going for it. And in fact, one of the windmills is a museum dedicated to her honor. So, it would be something very unique that not even a lot of people in Spain experience in that regards. And well, since you are in the area, I very much recommend you also go to Almagro. Almagro is considered one of the most beautiful villages in Spain. You may remember from previous talks that in certain countries we have these tourism boards that protect certain heritage. Well, in Spain we have this curated list of most beautiful villages. Almagro is one of them, and someone who has been there 100% can testify why it's in that list. It's a town with a lot of heritage, small heritage, but very important, particularly in what relates to two main topics, religious heritage and theater. El Teatro de Almagro, el Corral de Comedias de Almagro, which is what you see here with the sort of canopy on top, is the most complete Corral de Comedias of the Spanish Golden Age. It is still original from the 17th century. Corral de Comedias is a very specific form of theater that happens in Spain roughly at the same time that Shakespeare is rocking the boat in England, and it's iconic. The way to visit this, by the way, is incredible because it is a theatralized visit. So the guided tour is essentially 3 or 4 actors getting into the stage and having like a little play explaining what would have happened at the theater and what the theater would have been used for, which is really cool. So again, one of those things that if you're gonna go visit it, it's important that you give it the due credit. Theater is a very important aspect of Spanish culture, not that a lot of people are aware of. And Almagro is one of many. It's just not all of these corrales de comedias have survived, unfortunately, but it is an important thing in our culture and our city. And in fact, there is a whole theater festival that takes place in here, not necessarily in the Corral de Comedias, but overall throughout the year. So, and it's a wonderful place where to eat, by the way. In Almagro, in the main square, in Plaza Mayor, which is the picture on the left, you will be able to eat traditional Castilian or manchega cuisine, which will completely blow your mind. But, be prepared because the dishes are filling. Well, now we're going to another part of Castilla-La Mancha, which is Cuenca, which perhaps, I don't want to sound biased, but perhaps is one of my favorite places. Now, the city of Cuenca itself is absolutely charming and again, often completely under the radar, even though it's UNESCO heritage, because of, well, a few aspects. First of all, this cathedral, which is absolutely iconic in its own right. And I have a small clip, by the way, if you want to see it in motion here in the YouTube channel as well in the short section. And the city center is gorgeous. It's you kind of start the city at the bottom of the hill with the river, and then you kind of go walking up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and it's swings and roundabouts of medieval, golden age, baroque buildings belonging to nobles, different religious orders, etc. It is beautiful, to be fair. Now, the foundation of the cathedral goes back to the Reconquista. Is from the 12th century originally. Is one of the earliest examples of Gothic in Spain, by the way, thanks to the support of a very important queen for the country, which often is forgotten about in international spheres, which is Eleanor Plantagenet, the daughter of Henry II and of Eleanor of Aquitaine, which, yes, ended up in our noble family. Well, because of her marriage with the Spanish monarchy, she very much wanted to push for this new style, which of course came from France. And Cuenca is, a pioneer because of that. It's a very peculiar cathedral for being Gothic. As you can see, the facade is is very unique. And once you actually go inside, you notice that even more. And then you have the picture on the right next to it, which is what we call Las Casas Colgadas, which are buildings from the 15th century. So some of them have been restored, obviously, but the constructions were already there in the 15th century, and they are literally just off the edge of the cliff. Cuenca is actually on a massive gorge, and you can see this from the back of the cathedral and a few other parts of the city, which is why the river creates this spindly bit. And honestly, the landscape is absolutely breathtaking. So very, very much something that I would recommend that you do, because not many people notice this is here, and the dramatic landscapes are just quite breathtaking, in addition to the culture and heritage, of course. And well, in the area not far away from it, we have an incredible castle, which is El Castillo de Belmonte, and in general Belmonte overall, which is again a beautiful village. On top of the village, there is an incredibly imposing castle in a wonderful state of conservation, which dates from the 15th century. And one of the reasons why the castle of Belmonte is in such a wonderful state of conservation inside and out is because in the 19th century it was inherited by Eugenia de Montijo, who will become the future wife of Napoleon III. So the woman will actually invest a lot of money into this, and she became responsible for the conservation of the place, and her descendants continued her labor, particularly in recent years, because this ended up through the Spanish noble lines down the house of Alba, which has always been a very important noble family in Spain. And well, it's very important because it's been used for films a lot. In fact, if you've seen the traditional film of El Cid with Sophia Loren and Charlton Heston, this castle appears there abundantly. And it also contains one of my favorite things ever, which is the largest park dedicated to siege warfare in the whole of Europe, which is called Trebuchet Park. Again, in the short section of the channel, there is a video where I tape different siege engines that have been put together through the Middle Ages and the Golden Age to explain how artillery and warfare developed and whatnot. And in the summer months, they have a big fair. Many of the machines are actually in working condition, so you can see them operative, which is super cool. And they also have a tournament of full contact medieval fighting, which is a huge spectacle that if you can visit and enjoy, I'm sure will definitely make your visit very special. Well, let's move on to another Quixote related location, which is El Toboso. Now, El Toboso is a small village in what we call La Ruta Don Quixote. There is a whole route that you can do in Spain from beginning to end that follows the steps of El Quixote. And El Toboso is very important because it is home to the famous Dulcinea. In case that you are not familiar with the story, Quixote falls madly in love with this woman called Dulcinea who lives in El Toboso. And actually, the supposed house of Dulcinea, I also have a video of that explaining a bit more of this in the short section of the YouTube channel. Well, in fact, I'll say it, modern art installation that you see here in front of the church is Quixote and Dulcinea together. So in here we have the home museum of Dulcinea herself. We also have El Museo Cervantino, which is actually the Cervantine museum dedicated to an exploration of the largest collection of copies of El Quixote in all of Europe, which is incredibly, breathtaking. And we also have in here a celebration of las Jornadas Cervantinas, which is like a sort of Renaissance fair kind of vibe, entirely dedicated to El Quixote and Quixote culture. So if you time it well, you can actually get a lot from a relatively short area. One thing I would say though, for the vast majority of Castilla-La Mancha, is you probably want a car or to make good use of bus transport. The distances can be a bit long. The trains don't really go very well through here, except through some very specific places. So that's something definitely to take into consideration. And finally, we have the region of Extremadura. Extremadura is, to me, one of those regions that, again, so many people forget about, and it is so, so amazing. And I just wish more people actually would engage with it. More importantly, Extremadura is super important in Spanish heritage for different reasons. It is home to a lot of denominación de origen products. Denominación de origen is the DPO of the European Union, normally cultural items related to food that are protected because the space of cultivation or growth or production is traditional or has been done in that way for hundreds of years, is special, the flavor, etc. So in Extremadura, we have many of those. We have Ribera del Guadiana, which is a very prominent wine. Dehesa Jamón Ibérico, which is perhaps one of the best types of Iberico ham that you can have in the whole country. Several cheeses, olive oil, and of course, the most important of them all, Pimentón de la Vera. Pimentón de la Vera is a staple of Spanish cuisine, which is paprika. Now, everybody thinks, oh, paprika, like the sweet paprika or the hot paprika that you get in a lot of countries, like, for example, the US or the UK, has nothing to do with Pimentón de la Vera. We have many different varieties depending on the flavor, on the smokiness, on the texture, and it's all to do with the quality of the ingredients that are done to create this type of paprika and the conservation and, way of making it, which is super important. But yeah, no worthy Spanish pantry has a lack of Pimentón de la Vera. Even I, in the exile in the UK, where Spanish products sometimes can be difficult to find, I have a can of Pimentón de la Vera, which for me is like red gold that I, buy from the internet or from like delis or Christmas markets where some vendors come together. It is a very important part of our cuisine, and a lot of flavorings of the region and a lot of dishes have Pimentón de la Vera specifically, which is a very recognizable flavor. Well, first things first, let me introduce you to the beautiful town of Badajoz. Badajoz is actually one of the largest walled areas of Spain. Here you can see part of it. It's 6,541 meters, so it's well over 6 kilometers, and it dates from the Middle Ages onwards. So not all the length of the walls are from the Middle Ages. It starts in the Middle Ages and it just keeps on accumulating and accumulating. The area is also well known for its neo-Islamic architecture, which you can see very well here on the right. It's actually a very quaint town that a lot of people seem to forget is there, and that is very close to the Portuguese border, to Andalusia. It's barely over 2 hours drive from Seville, and you can get there by train as well or bus. And it's about 2.5 to 3 hours from Madrid. So as you can see, the distances are not massive. So it's a good base of operations, I would say. And then you have Cáceres. Cáceres is another UNESCO heritage site in Spain because of the medieval city and its monumental complex. Cáceres is a town that is full of little noble palaces and manor houses that have been there since the Middle Ages in a wonderful state of conservation. The town has an incredible amount of defensive towers, and it's actually home to something that a lot of people don't necessarily relate with Spain, which is this, the WOMAD, World Cultural Festival by Peter Gabriel. This started, back in the 70s, believe it was. It's a very important cultural output, not just for the city, but, for for Spain overall. And it just brings so much flavor, not just in terms of music, but artisans, crafts, artistry is legitimately a very important thing to celebrate in Cáceres and in Spain overall. And well, somewhere in the middle, there is actually a very important UNESCO heritage site that a lot of people forget to visit when they are in Extremadura or in Spain, which is this. This is El Real Monasterio de Santa María de Guadalupe. This is the Royal Monastery of Saint Mary of Guadalupe. It's UNESCO, and it is dedicated to the Virgin of Guadalupe, who is considered la Reina de la Hispanidad. Now, on the 12th of October, every single year, we have what we call, what people sort of associate with Columbus Day, but that actually in Spain and in a lot of Latin American countries has been revamped for a long time ago as the Day of Hispanidad, of Hispanic culture, of Hispanic background, which is it's important for many people. Why? Because it is the place and date where the meeting of Columbus and the Catholic monarchs, of course, takes place at, and that leads to the extension of the cult of the Virgin of Guadalupe to the rest of South America. The Virgin de Guadalupe in Mexico all the way down to the edge of Patagonia is one of the fundamental virgins and cult practices of Christianity. It is one thing that binds all of the Latin American, Hispanic people, and Spanish people across the world. So, as you know, religion is a very important part of this traditional background. It's a way of actually finding the common ground together and kind of trying to bridge the gap between the colonist and colonizer kind of a narrative. So the monastery itself, on top of being absolutely breathtaking, because I'm sure you can tell in terms of architecture, it's an icon from the Middle Ages all the way to modern times, contains a funerary chapel that is very important. But from the point of view of that Hispanic identity, is super important for people across the Atlantic because of what it means. So this is another place that is in Extremadura and that most people forget about. And finally, of course, I save best for last, or well, we can argue if it's best. In my opinion, is one of the best places that we have in Spain, one of these places that a lot of people still don't know that exists, even in Spain, which is Merida. Merida is the famous Emerita Augusta. It's one of the most important Roman settlements in Spain, and actually one of the most important conservation centers of Roman heritage in the whole of Europe. In fact, the whole town is UNESCO heritage site because of the quality and quantity of Roman monuments that you have. In fact, in front of you, you have now the Roman bridge, which is over 700 meters, most of which is still the original Roman bridge, although with some conservation work done in there. It's an incredibly beautiful town of barely 60,000 inhabitants, with a Roman reenactment festival that takes place every single year at the end of May, and that frankly not enough people from outside of Spain know it's there. And well, here you have a bit of the Roman Forum, so you can find bits like this everywhere across Merida, which is generally worth the while. Merida is also home to well, not just this, but well, here is a picture of the I'll say it, of the festival, which is really a big thing. It goes over a whole weekend. It involves the whole town, like the locals actually dress up and partake. Different reenactment groups from all of Spain come together to celebrate, even from international locations all across Europe. So it's a really big deal. And yet, like I said, it's almost like something local people and a few very interested Spanish people know. But from an international perspective, the majority of people that attend this maybe come from Portugal or France. In the English speaking sphere, it's very, very little known. And, I'm not going to say that it rivals that of Rome, but it's a very large output in many ways. Well, Merida is also home to many other items of Roman culture, including, of course, the famous Theater of Merida. This is the best preserved Roman theater in the world. In fact, it's still a fully functional theater. I'm sure you can tell part of the stage is actually blocked because, well, this was in the middle of the festival and they do actually open live theater in here, but that's something that is used all year round. On the other side of the amphitheater, there is an amphitheater. We have a Roman circus for the races. There is the Mithraeum, which is a house dedicated to the cult of Mithras. There is honestly so much stuff, including the Museum of Roman Art, which is one of the the largest for sure, and best preserved in terms of conservation and quality in the country, and probably one of the best in Europe outside of Italy. So go to Merida, explore Extremadura, explore the other parts of the south of Spain that apparently no one else but me and a couple of other friends know exist in here. As you see, there's so much more to just Granada, Sevilla, Cordoba, and Valencia. They're lovely towns, and I'm not saying don't go to them. I'm saying there's so much more beyond it, and so much which is quality. Because a lot of people go to these places because, oh, UNESCO, oh, UNESCO. How many times have I said the word UNESCO in 45 minutes talking to you guys right now? Because I think I've said it at least 5 to 10 times. I haven't actually counted. This is a guesstimate. But I'm confident I've said it at least 5 times. So there is so much to explore. In fact, in case you don't know, Spain is actually one of the countries with the highest density of UNESCO heritage sites, and that's just sites. Let's not talk about celebrations, immaterial culture, etc. Get around, leave the better known destinations or include them alongside with some other smaller places that will definitely, you know, give you a more authentic side of Spain, and often places that you may have not known about and are equally wonderful and magnificent. And on that note, while I can carry on raving about my country for a long, long time, I shall leave it there for you guys. So thank you so much for giving the lesser known south of Spain a chance. I hope that if you get to explore any of these places, you let us know, what your experiences were like and what have you not. And as usual, thank you for your support. Like I said, the links are in the chat. Feel free to drop us a message. You can support us on Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal. And we will see you on the next one. Until then, thank you so much for your time and hoping that you have a very lovely rest of your day. Bye bye.